Hey guys, this is Matt Granger, that Nikon guy. Today I wanted to talk to you about resolution and how it relates to how big you can print your image. There's a lot of people wondering about this, and you might be surprised that on one hand you hear people talking about how you can make a fantastic, enormous print from a 6 megapixel camera if you do it the right way, and then other people saying, you know, even a D4 you can only print a whatever size print and it sounds quite small. So I just wanted to run through and clarify a couple of misconceptions here. So the gold standard, and your number you'll often hear thrown around, is 300 dpi. You need 300 dpi for printing. Now, depending on which printer you use, the standard is 300 or 240 dpi actually, but that rule comes from the world of publishing. It's all about magazines where you're going to be looking at whatever it is about arm's length away. At that distance, the eye can't differentiate when it's at 300 pixels per inch. It looks like it's continuous and that there's no gaps in there. It's like, you know, our eye can't see below 24 frames per second or whatever. So they show TV at that rate or faster, and every still moving that fast looks like continuous motion. It's kind of that theory. But there is a ratio involved. So if you get 10 foot away, then the amount of information that you need, or how big or small the dots have to be so that they seem completely continuous, changes. And the further and further and further away you get away from things, the amount of resolution you need in terms of how high quality the files need to be, how many dots per inch you need to be supplying, drops dramatically. For example, if you're shooting for a billboard and it's only going to be looked at from 100 feet or 50 meters or something like that away, or even more, you realistically could get away, depending on what graphic you're using, at like 4 dots per inch or something crazy like that. Have you ever seen one of those art books where it's just a series of lots of dots, but then when you hold it far enough away you see that there's actually a picture there, but up close you can't see it? Well, it's a bit like that. If something's way away, you can be super low resolution, but you just can't distinguish that detail. For example, I shot last year a billboard-sized series of graphics, but they were going to be viewed at a trade show, and people would be walking right beside them. So they still needed to have over 200 dpi, despite being meters and meters wide in size. So for that, I was using the Nikon D3X, and I still had to up-res them something like 200 or 300% to get them just at the minimum that the printers required. Now, two things here. If you are going to be up-resing your images, you want to get it as pin sharp and perfectly exposed and have everything right as you possibly can, because as you increase the file size, even using the best algorithms in Photoshop, any flaws or that kind of thing are going to be accentuated as it stretches out the information. It does fill in the gaps, but if it starts off blurry, it's going to look messier and messier the bigger you go. A little tip for you there: if you are blowing things up, I suggest look at the image at 100% res on your screen, and then as you're resizing, leave it at 100%. And if once you've up-res it, it still looks okay on screen, it'll print okay. As a general guide, as a rule of thumb, that's pretty much true. That's how I operate. Now, another thing that people often say is that, you know, doubling your resolution doesn't double your print size. That's actually not true. It's because there's a misconception about what doubling print size is. For example, if you want to print at 300 dpi, and say your camera's resolution, just to make this super easy, I know no camera has this dimensions, but say your sensor is 6000 by 3000, so it's a panorama type setup, so it's an 18 megapixel camera, then at 6000 divided by 300, you can get 20 inches, and at 3000 divided by 300, you can get 10 inches, so it'll make a 10 by 20 image perfectly. Now, people say, okay, but then if you double it to a 36 megapixel image, that won't let you make a double-sized print. It won't let you make instead of a 20 by 10, it won't let you make a 40 by 20. No, it won't, but that isn't doubling the size of your print. That's quadrupling. This is really basic maths, guys, but for whatever reason, people often get this confused when it comes to prints. If you go from a 10 by 10 to a 20 by 20, just think about the surface area. You went from 100 to 400. That's 4 times bigger. If you want to double a 10 by 10, you go to 20 by 10, surface area of 200, or 10 by 20, a surface area of 200. Or you times them both by around 1.42. So 14.2 by 14.2 is also going to yield around about 200. So, you know, just think about if you're buying space in the newspaper and you're buying columns. If you're buying 3 columns by 5 centimeters and say you want to double the ad, they're not going to be giving you 6 columns by 10 centimeters. That's 4 times the ad. So yes, if you want to double both parameters, then you need to quadruple your resolution. So going from a 10 megapixel to a 40 megapixel will allow that doubling on each axis. But to double the size of a print, and it is the actual doubling, it's doubling the surface area, the frame you need to get, how imposing it's going to be in your home is getting significantly bigger. And yes, the difference between a 20 by 20 or a 28 by 28 is significantly bigger. You don't need to double on both axes. That's quadrupling, and it's a huge difference. So I hope that's clear for you. But that said, like when you're using on web, 72 DPI is a standard, and I've made some fantastic prints at just around 180 DPI that still look great on the wall. It really depends on how you're going to be using them. The sad thing is, well, not a sad thing, but the reality is a lot of prints these days, whilst even when they're huge and they're made to look at from across the room and wow, people love to pixel peep, not even when it's on the computer screen, when it's hung on the wall. So people, if it's a landscape or whatever, are probably going to get up right close and check out the detail. So if there's a chance that your work's going to be looked at that way, I personally would recommend that you go for 240 DPI or above. If you can get to 300, great. But don't feel bad about interpolating in software if you've got a nice sharp image to start with. And another little tip for you, I've done some tests myself where I've looked at doing incremental increases by interpolation, or doing one huge jump. So say going from a 10 by 10 to a 20 by 20, so quadrupling the size, doing it 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%, 10% to get to my final size, or just doing it all in one go in Photoshop. And I really can't see a difference doing it in one step to doing it in all of the steps. So I personally just do it in one step these days. Even if you've set up a macro, it saves a lot of time to do it in the one step. So I hope that's helpful, guys. Leave any questions or comments, and I'll see you soon. This is Matt Granger, that Nikon guy. Until next time, get your gear out.